And why is it so cold in here? I didn't leave my door open or anything. It's just landlords are getting cheap, I guess. That's okay. I don't pay for electricity. Alright, so let's go ahead and see whether or not we're live. I have a sneaking suspicion we are. Do. Yep, we're live. And I will go ahead and tell the world about it. Hey, we're streaming. Game dev, gonna do hair and skin paste. And then again. Alright. So strange things in my stream. Anyway, so in the last couple of months, we've been really struggling. I've been really struggling to get a skin shader to work. In my off time, I went and I looked into Unity's new lightweight shader graph, and it's useless. It doesn't allow you to get any light pass data, so you can't create any skin effects. You can't do things like subsurface scatter or anything like that. So, yeah, that's trash. Another thing I can do is I can re-import any of the millions of broken... come on, I want to go to the part where I actually own stuff and I download it. Why are you connecting? Thank you. I love your ads. God damn, I hate that news store. I just want to go here. Jeez. All right. So now that Unity forces you to go through their ads in order to get to the things you already downloaded, we can see that we've got several other things going on here. We've got a hair designer, which I guess I'll hit update on. We've got a subsurface scatterer and a pre-integrated skin shader, both of which deserve 1 star. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-download this one because it was the better one. And we'll see whether or not they fixed it. If not, I'll hack it and make it work. These are both paid products, neither of which work. One of the reasons I have been so salty for the past month is because I go into the Unity Asset Store and I buy things and they don't work. I am an angry fellow this week. I've been working pretty much non-stop at trying to get this to do anything, and nothing works. Nothing. So, yeah, it's disheartening. I think that the #1 challenge I expected for getting people with hair. I expected to have to learn how to do hair, and I didn't know very much about it. And that's definitely turning out to be true. Hair is definitely a serious challenge, but I can't even get things like crap I buy to work. So here you can see that there is a bunch of stuff in the skin shader where it doesn't work, and I can't run the game because I've installed the skin shader. So the only thing I can really do is go over into these skin shader elements and just delete the editors for them. And I don't really want to, but I don't really have much choice, do I? Because they don't work, and I don't plan to go in and reprogram all your shit. Okay, now next. It's propertydrawer.cs. No, what are you doing? Don't open anything. Go away. Just select it. That's the one. Goodbye. Oh wait, that's a DLL. That's not a CS file. Is a problem with the DLL? No, it says it's propertydrawers.cs, but there's no CS. It's only a DLL. Well, we'll delete it anyway. The only question is whether or not this will survive the hacking and slashing I'm doing to try and get it to work. And we'll know right about now. Okay, so what we've got is a setup where I've deleted half of the operational elements of the skin shader's editor. And so I don't know whether the skin shader will even work anymore. The actual skin shader itself works fine in the past, and the other one does as well, but all of the editor stuff breaks. And that's not me doing something wrong. That's them not bothering to keep up with Unity. which is, I mean, it's understandable. Unity does a lot of random shit they don't even keep up with themselves, but you're asking for money, and it doesn't work. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and track down the skin shader here, and we'll just go ahead and get ourselves a combined skin shader like this. Now, all of the maps that I've created were created specifically for the other shader setup, so none of them are going to look right, but this isn't too terrible. And you can see how it already looks like skin, although this person isn't exactly the most attractive person in terms of their skin. Still, that's fine. I can live with this. It compiles, it works, it gives me stupid errors, but I'm okay with that as long as it doesn't so long as it doesn't prevent me from actually doing things. Now, if I hit play, we should be able to get a couple different characters. Yeah, so let's take a look. So obviously these characters are ugly. They're completely random at this point, and I haven't bothered to put any constraints in, but let's go ahead and change. Oh, that's the photo booth. That's not what I wanted to do. Well, too late now. What I wanted to do was randomize the characters, which are... There we go. Now I can hit play. Oh, but I have to the photo booth has to be reverted. Let's try that again. Oh, can't do it with multiple instances? Okay, well, we'll just do it one by one. And we have to reassign the characters. That's why doing this stuff when you're annoyed is always a bad idea, because you'll do something too fast, and then you'll have to go and do more work to fix it, and you'll feel even worse. There we go. So we've got a couple of random characters, which are pretty garbage, but that's fine. I'm just going to randomize them one more time and see whether I can get someone that doesn't look too bad at the moment. Because there's no kind of constraints at all. It's just completely random. Now the problem is that the skin that we're trying to use is... Wow, these people are a lot more aggressively mutated than they were last couple of times. This is interesting. I don't remember them looking this bad, or looking this extreme. Maybe I need to just go into the armature editor, or the head editor here, and change the amount of scaling that happens as something that we can edit. Because if I can do that, I can make them closer to, not ideal, but default. And that way they will morph a little bit less aggressively. If we look down at randomize, here we see it. All we do is we initialize the seed, and then we go to randomize, where we randomize the bones, the shapes, and the skin. These bones, what we do is we start with a weight of 1, and then each time we reduce the weight. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create that bone weight as an object here. Public float. Hey, look, there's an update for Visual Studio Code. So we're going to go ahead and create a bone shape. I've forgotten what I was doing. Bone deform scale. Yeah, bone deform scale equals 1, and then we're also going to do blend shape deform scale equals 1. All right, there we go. And so we are just going to hop on down here and set that equal to, oh, this needs to be 100. No, we'll leave it at 1. We'll just modify it ourselves. No biggie. 100 times blend shape deform scale, and up here it'll be 1 times bone deform scale. There we are. That will allow us to reduce the excessiveness of these creatures. And if we hop over to the species definition, we'll want to modify it on the main photo booth here. And we will just change it so that instead of a 1, it's like a 0.6. We'll make this 0.8. And then we'll just hit apply. That'll propagate it. And those same incredibly ugly creatures that we had before should be a little bit more acceptable. They're still ugly, but now they're ugly in at least a believable way. But what I wanted to talk about was the skin. We're using, we've got some darker skinned characters, and we're using the default skin setup for them. But the problem with that is that the responsiveness isn't correct. And we can adjust it so the responsiveness is a little bit more correct, but I can't remember which of these does it. It doesn't really matter. We can adjust it, but I haven't done so. So anyone without a pale skin is going to look really, really pitch black in this current setup, and that's just because I haven't finished setting it up yet, but I can. Currently, it's still configured for the default shader, so everything looks bad, but that's okay. All the textures, I mean, but that's okay because I can fix that. What I can't fix is this hair, which has somehow gotten worse since the last time I looked at it. I think I'm using the wrong. I'm using the wrong material for this hair. But the problem is that in order to make hair, we have two basic options. We can either, you know what, I want to fix this. So what we've got here is a setup where the transform tracker cables are erroring because we're setting them to active when they're trying to be inactive. There's no way to check and see whether the game object is currently being set. See, there's no dirty flag here. So I can't really tell whether or not it's already being set as inactive. The problem is that when we stop the game, this gets called. And, no, wait, that's not what happens. This gets called. No? One of these gets called. They both get called. I think it's this one that actually happens. But it turns it off. It turns the cable off. And then, at that point, maybe setup gets called twice. There's a reason why it's getting turned on or turned off twice. But that's something I can fix, and I know how. I just need to remember where I stored the secret code. No, that's a face. No, that's Japanese. No, that's a tutorial. There it is. So there are some runtime initialize unload methods which I can use to change how that works. But to be honest, it's not the error I thought it was, so maybe I'll leave it for now. Anyway, hair is obviously going to be my #1 problem. Now, I do have some hair assets. I have this hair designer here. I can import the hair designer and show you what it's like, but the problem is that it's really a fur designer, not a hair designer. So we're going to go ahead and give it a shot and see whether or not it works. There were some very serious bugs with it when I last tried it, but unlike the shaders, this actually had an update, so maybe it'll work. Yeah. Apparently it has not been updated to the most recent version of Unity, which is not good. Nothing works. It used to be that Unity was the one that was easy to use because you could just get whatever you needed on the asset store, plug and play. But these days, even things you buy on the asset store don't work. Even Unity's own packages don't work. It's amazing. It's like, it's worse than an open source piece of software. I could literally get a better workflow out of Godot. And that is really, really a shame. I've been seriously considering switching over to Godot or maybe to Unreal, but I don't want to do it in the middle of a project. Although this project has barely started, so maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea. So one of the other things I was doing is I was trying to do Blender hair with particles. And Blender has actually radically improved their hair particle system so that you can actually do a fairly good job of like combing it and making it have body and stuff. It used to be a nightmare, but now it's pretty good. Only problem being, of course, that particle hair is useless to a game engine. And so I can't do anything with it. And I had heard from someone that there might... Look, there it is. And I heard from someone that there might be a way to create a low poly mesh out of hair particles. But if there is, it's not on the internet. At least not with any keywords I can discern. The only things I can do with the setup that I could find was to turn it into 10 million particles, all of which have their own set of faces. And it would end up being something like 100,000 or 200,000 faces. And that's obviously not going to fly. So the other option we have is to try and do it here in Unity, but unfortunately, this setup, I just put it in, but I might have to take it back out since it's bugging out. So we'll just delete it again. But basically what it does is it allows you to create flyaways very fast, but it doesn't allow you to create core hair shapes. So that means that you can do really, really short hair, okay, because then you can just color the scalp. But if you want to have something that's got body, it's not going to work because it's just the wrong shape. So because of that, I can't really use the hair designer that I can buy for Unity, especially since it no longer compiles. But I also can't use it in Blender. So let's go ahead and pop over to Blender and take a quick look. We're gonna try and spend the next few weeks probably are gonna be me trying to learn how to do hair. Feel free to chime in if you have a lot of experience doing hair, but remember, we're not talking about Blender rendering. We're talking about game engines. So if we are talking about particle hair, that has to come as part of a package to turn it into low poly or medium poly hair in a game engine. And that's just something that Blender does not appear to support. So this is what Blender looks like, right? And this is just me farting around and creating some generic hair shapes. I did a couple of different shapes just to test it out. But here's the issue with Blender, right? After you've got the core shape set up, one of the other things you're going to need to do is create fronds or flyaways. Now, if we're doing toony hair, they don't have to have any transparency, and that's fine. I can deal with toony hair. I'll figure out a shader for it at some point, but I still have to create the flyaways. So how do you do that in Blender? How do I create a stripe in Blender? How do I create like a lock of hair here? Well, one way is I could do it the same way I was doing this. And this was, I created these using a technique where, I must have deleted the other one, where I created shells and then I just gave them depth. But here's the issue. These are really not the best shape for, well, maybe they'll be okay. Let's try it. So we'll just go ahead and duplicate this. But there's really no easy way for us to manipulate this into a smaller frond or, you know, something that makes sense. Now, what really would make sense is if we used a curve like this, because these curves can be easily edited, and I can just, you know, make the curve fit into the hair any way I want. But here are a couple of issues with that. The first is that the curve has a base point, and I'm not sure whether or not if when I move away from the base point it actually errors out. It could be, depending on how we attach whatever we're trying to attach to the curve, that will error out. And the other problem is that when I want to turn this curve into a frond, how do I do that? And this is something where I've seen a lot of, you know, advice on the internet, but all of it appears to be wrong or bad. It's certainly much harder than it is in something like Maya, and that's pretty unacceptable because this is things that you have to do this literally dozens or hundreds of times. So it being hard is not just a small issue. It being hard is a tremendous issue. So how do you turn this into a frond? And the number one way I've seen people recommend is by creating a plane and then shaping the plane into a frond shape. Something like this. And then telling it to be bound to the curve. And here I'm asking you questions. I'm not trying to teach you because I don't think this is the right way to do it. I just don't know how to do it, and I thought I would just see whether anybody else had any ideas here. And then what you've got is a mesh that is nowhere to be seen because it's not bound to the curve properly. It's kind of floating around somewhere. Now you can bind it to the curve with a parenting tool like this, path constraint, and that'll keep it in the same place, but you still have to set it up properly because it's right now it's in the middle of friggin' nowhere. It doesn't make any sense at all. But, you know, setting it up is a huge pain in the ass. And there's probably a way to do it, but I don't know what that way is. All I know for sure is that this is a really, really bad way to bind the curve. And once I have bound the curve like this, I can't duplicate it very easily. In order to duplicate it, I have to select both the curve and the mesh. and I can't just duplicate the curve. So now I've duplicated both, and then when I move them around, I'm editing them both at the same time, and then when I want to just edit the curve, it's hard to see, it's hard to click on. So if you know of a way to make Blender behave, tell me. I have tried to search for tools to make this work. Maybe my Google Foo is bad, but all of the Blender hair tutorials I could find are this setup where you've got just meshes and you're manipulating the meshes, and that is a mess. That is not how you want to do this. On My Flow says, did you already try Blender 2.8? Not in the past month, but when I tried it last time, it couldn't support very basic features. There were things missing like mirroring, and I couldn't use it. But if Blender 2.8 has come a little bit of a ways since then and has a feature where I can do this, please tell me, because I am very curious. I am looking forward to Blender 2.8, but I can't use it until it's usable. And last time I checked, it wasn't. The really funny part of the past few months is that Blender has gone from being the most annoying piece of software to being the second most, behind Unity. Unity has become by far more annoying than Blender because at least Blender gets stuff done. But I still can't use Blender to do the things I need to use. Oh, On My Flow says it was just released into beta. That's cool. So, have you used it yet? Let's go ahead and try and create fronds with a couple of measures. I know that there's a method of drawing onto a surface, but I never could remember how to do it. So that's not drawing on a surface. What is the drawing on a surface technique? This is something I don't remember even how to get started on. There was a way to do it. It wasn't like a grease pencil conversion or anything. It was like literally just drawing a path straight onto the surface. Well, there's the draw curve button. Interesting that it's grayed out and doesn't tell you why. Don't really know. So the only thing I can really think of to do is to get an edge like this and then use the edge as if it was a curve and then extrude the edge. But that is like, wow, that is really, really basic and bad. That doesn't make any sense at all. And all of the tutorials I can find are telling you to manually manipulate these planes, which is hilarious. And I don't recommend that at all. And there's probably a better way to do it, and it's just not something where the tutorials exist yet. On My Flow says, they tried it out, nice new UI, some new editor features, just started watching, so I don't understand the problem you're having. Well, the problem I'm having is I can't make flyaway cards or fronds in Blender. Normally, the way you do it in something like Maya, Norvy says that Blender 2.8 is looking fancy. Normally, how you do it in something like Maya is you have a curve, and you attach the frond to a curve, and then you can edit the curve. And then when you want another frond, you duplicate the curve. But if you try and do that in Blender, you'll end up with just the curve and not the frond. I haven't found any way to actually make it so that the frond is permanently tied to the curve. That's really the number one thing I have a hard time with in Blender. And that means that whenever I'm trying to edit any sort of setup, I really, really have to continually struggle with just the most fundamental aspect of getting that curve to work out. And it's always got to be a mesh instead, and the mesh is just miserable. And so Mifaz is recommending some Danny Mac. So Danny Mac is a ZBrush person. Why he ditched ZBrush for Blender for hair. Wow, this is really recent. Because I actually watched his ZBrush hair tutorials recently. Um, so he's talking about specific tools. Make sure that I'm not accidentally playing any audio here. Da, 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 da. Bevel curve tools. Blender add-ons that help you with creating and maintaining beveled curves. I might need the Sculpt Tools add-on. So these are two tools that I'm going to have to learn offline. But, I mean, to be honest, if Danny Mac is doing it with Blender, that means there's a way to do it. He's quite good. And that is a first real sign of hope I've seen recently. So thanks a ton, Mifaz, because that might be a big help. Mifaz says, have you watched this tutorial for creating hair in Blender? Presumably he's talking about the one that he just linked. No, as I was just mentioning, I've watched a lot of his tutorials, but I thought he was ZBrush, pretty much ZBrush only. I didn't realize that he was doing things in Blender now. I'm probably going to watch that as soon as this ends. I'm certainly not going to watch it on stream, as funny as that might be to stream me watching someone else's stream. That's a big help for me because, as you can see, the hair shapes I was going for are pretty primitive. Now, I've tried a whole bunch of other things. I did some ZBrush hair stuff, but the problem with the ZBrush hair stuff is that once you create the hair shape, it has a bad topology, and then you've got to retopologize it, and so now you've got a blob that you have to retopologize, which is obnoxious, but I can figure out how to do it. But then, I actually don't know very much about making a ZBrush do sheets like fronds. None of those make sense to me in ZBrush. I always end up punching holes in them and screwing them up, and it might just be that I don't know how to do it, and there is a way, but I have a feeling I'm using the wrong words to look it up because I don't get anything useful. But Mifaz has given me a tutorial that may be a huge help, so that's great. So now that I know that there is something to watch, there's not really any point for me trying to sculpt hair, because I don't know how to do it yet. It looks like I might need some tools. But I expect that even after I get those tools running, I'm going to need to actually learn how to do it, because it's not something where it just magically works. You need to have a sense for hair and how it works, and I don't. So I'm going to need to practice. And I don't think practicing live is a great idea unless like you've got people who actually know how to do it watching you. And I don't know how many of you actually have done any sort of hair modeling, especially in Blender. So Danny Mac's style is 0 alpha transparency style, which means that he's probably using a toon hair setup, which is fine. But if I go for a toon hair 0 alpha transparency setup, then what I'm going to need to do is use a toon skin. Now, what I have been doing is I have been aiming for not a realistic skin, but a fairly high realism skin. And that means that all the shader work I have is with that in mind, and all the textures I have are with that in mind. Now, these sorts of scales for the faces, those are all incredibly ugly. Those sorts of scales for the faces are not large enough to really require too much in terms of beautifying. Mifaz says that he doesn't know jack shit about hair, but you did find a tutorial. So this is obviously not toon skin. Even in this small screen, you can clearly see that the skin is not toony at all. It looks like the seed is working wrong, because they always seem to have the same set of faces. No, see, that can't be a coincidence. We've got two people with the same pouchy face, just at different angles. That's really strange. I wonder if there's something wrong with my seed setting. Well, either way. I can switch this out for a 2D face. That, however, would require a custom shader, and as I've mentioned, custom shaders are apparently really obnoxious at this exact moment in Unity's history. This one works, but I can't really edit it very well anymore because I deleted all the editors to get it to compile. But it's not a toon shader. I could make a toon skin shader out of one of the other shader systems. Let's go ahead and try that out. What's it called? It's called Shader something. Shader Forge. I've got Shader Forge. I've got both of those. Amplify, Uber, and Shader Forge. Well, the Shader Forge is finally depreciated. It took them long enough to admit that. Why don't I go ahead and try Amplify? I wish it would tell me when the last update was. Oh, right. This takes forever. So I'll bite ice straight into the mic. Sorry about that. Oh, a bunch of people retweeted my random thing saying I was streaming. Bunch meaning two. Which is two more than usual. Did I remember to actually publish? Yeah, okay, I did. Let's go to the video manager for there. We'll delete that in a minute. Grind. So, the reason I am opening up the Amplify shader instead of the Unity shader system is because the Unity shader system it doesn't work. It has a very, very primitive setup that doesn't include any light passes. And that might be a restriction just in the lightweight pipeline. But if so, the lightweight pipeline can't do skin or hair, which seems like a very serious problem. So either way, I won't be using that. I'll be using something like this instead. If it ever finishes importing. This is why, in general, you should import this shit before you start your stream. One of the problems with the Amplify shader editor is, of course, it comes with 10,000 samples, and they all have to be imported one by one. Which, I mean, is fine. It's not that big a deal. Normally. Because normally I'd go off and watch a movie or something. But instead, you're stuck here with me. How exciting. Now, I prefer the Shader Forge, but the Shader Forge degraded, and I couldn't use it anymore. It was producing some rather strange errors that nobody else seemed to have, and it looks like it got depreciated shortly thereafter. But there shouldn't be anything wrong with the Amplify shader editor. The only problem I had with it at the time was that it was a little bit under... It was missing a couple of nodes that I really wanted. But it's been like a year? So I hope that it has those nodes now. I suppose we'll find out very soon. Look at, now it's importing those small assets. I think I want curry. I think when the stream's over, I'll go get curry. The only place that serves curry around here is the pizza restaurant. And it's not very good. But let's go ahead and give ourselves an Amplify shader setup. So we can just pull up the Amplify shader if we can remember how to do it. I don't remember how to do it. Is this one of the situations where I have to create something and then I can do it. I thought it was just a window that I could pull up. So we'll just go into this Amplify Shader Editor, pull up an example. Oh, look, they've actually got samples. That's interesting for the pipelines. Maybe I'll look into that later. Here's some brushed metal. Standard shader. These are all from the standard shader. Well, those certainly aren't shader amplify shader examples. Those are generic examples. Huh. That's interesting. Ah, here we are. Do I have any bugs? Is this a situation? Ah, for fuck's sake! Nothing works! Message type does not contain a definition for info. Unity. If you're a new Unity user, check out our FAQ. Fuck you! Everything is broken, nothing works. Yeah, am I the only person on the planet having this problem? Did I do something to my Unity install to make it do this? Well, Mifaz, I'd love to create my own skin shader. That's why I got the Amplify Shader Editor and put it in. But it looks like Amplify Shader Editor doesn't compile. Just like everything else. This is getting to the point where I have to wonder whether or not there is something unique about my installation that somehow magically has a damaged message type. Because this doesn't make any fucking sense. How could my install have a different set of enums for message type? This is incredibly dumb. Every single thing I've tried to install in Unity for the past 2 months have had either this problem or a very similar problem. Which is clearly a serious issue. I don't know whether this is something wrong with Unity where they didn't bother to fucking test anything or what, but it means that if I want these things to work, I have to go through and change every single one of these lines, at which point I'll no longer be able to update it, and it will be randomly spouting other kinds of messages. Yeah, normal info. That's clearly what I wanted. So, I mean, I can go through and just manually change every single one of these 5 million errors. Or I can just delete Amplify Shader. Goodbye. Yet another thing that doesn't fucking work. Mifaz says, do you have your render pipeline set to the lightweight pipeline? I don't think so. In this case, I think I've got it set to the default pipeline, but I tested some stuff with the lightweight pipeline, and the lightweight pipelines, the Unity basic shader editor graph, the shader graph in Unity's own personal thing didn't have any light vector stuff, no light pass stuff, so I couldn't do anything. I need to be able to get the vector and magnitude of the light in order to be able to do any kind of, light-related stuff. Check the project settings in the graphics section. I got none. This is just what you get when you hit new project, or at least it was when I started the project. I wasn't too worried about it because I was planning to do other shaders, but yeah, this is just none. If you open a new project with a lightweight or high definition pipelines, there's a whole crapload of stuff that happens, and none of the default materials work anymore. So I'm not using them right now. On My Flow says that Blender 2.8 has collections that replace groups. With collections, you can then just duplicate the hairs without having to select the curve and the mesh. That's exactly what I needed to do. I want to be able to duplicate the curve and then immediately start to edit the curve and have the mesh just come along for the ride. If I can do that in Blender, I can create toon hair in Blender. So that'll be a nice change. Mifa says you have the default pipeline. Yeah, that's what I expected. I expected that I had the default pipeline. I don't know why that would change the type of messages that can be sent, because that's not a pipeline thing. That's an enum baked into the messaging system. I can convert standard materials to the new ones via menu. Well, I don't have any materials I give a shit about, but I can't get the lightweight pipeline to do anything that I need. I can't give it toon ramps. I can't give it light. I can't give it some a nice diffusion ramp so the light looks like it's on human skin. I can't give it a subsurface scatter. So I don't know why I would bother to switch pipelines. I can't get the new pipeline to do any of the things I need anyway. I might as well stick with the old pipeline and literally program these shaders, because I know how to do that. It's a pain in the ass, but I can do it. Since Unity no longer allows people to get things off the asset store, I might as well try and do it all myself. But this is a huge bottleneck. This is something that is such a tremendous bottleneck that it is seriously going to be easier to just do everything again in a different game engine. HDRP has subsurface scatter. HDRP is also an incredibly heavyweight solution. I mean, I guess I can give it a shot, but that's supposed to be for high definition games, and this isn't really that sort of game. I just need some skin that doesn't look like shit and some hair that doesn't look like shit. I shouldn't have to go with the heaviest possible solution to do that. As it's set up right now, this game is simple enough that you could run it on a phone, but I wouldn't be able to do that if I went with the high definition pipeline. I mean, I might have to in order to get the most basic features that I need, but that's a tremendous shame. I spent the whole last hour just ranting. Trying to think of what the best approach is, and I think the best approach is to go watch that Danny Mac tutorial, see whether or not Blender can actually do toon hair. If Blender can do toon hair, there's no reason to update to either the lightweight or the heavyweight pipeline, because I'll just get a fucking toon shader. Those are pretty easy to program. I can program one in an hour or less, and I'll just make everything fucking toon shaped. If that's going to be the only way Unity is going to let me do anything, then that's the way I'll do it. Because, I mean, the alternative is I can just switch engines, but I'm not comfortable enough with any other engine to hit the ground running. So, Right now, Unity is in incredibly bad shape. I don't believe they realize this, but they're making it incredibly hard to actually use Unity. Anything you get from the asset store, it's broken. Anytime you download something from Unity, it's broken. Anytime you need to do anything, the old ways don't work and there are no new ways. I think my favorite part of this, though, is when I went and I got myself the package for... I went into their fancy new package manager. You notice that I've deleted all of the ads and monitoring spam they put in every single project you create. I went down here into the shader graph, and I was like, okay, I've installed the shader graph, so I'll just view the documentation. And here's the hint. It says error, page not found. They literally didn't even bother to update their own main documentation link. That is how little of a shit Unity gives right now. And, I would say, yeah, use Unity. It's fine. It's a pretty easy thing to use, just flow. But that is seriously not the case anymore. It is a pain in the ass to do anything in Unity. Unreal is really good on my flow. Unreal is a stellar engine. It's more heavyweight than I wanted, and that's why I'm not using it right now. I didn't really want to go into a game engine and have that pressure to make it high realism. I wanted to be able to knock out something that was simple and looked like shit. I don't want it to look like shit, but I want it to look, basic. I don't need to have complicated lighting systems and stuff like that. And at the time, Unity's asset store was really spectacular. It had tons and tons of assets that I could just plug and play. That's not true anymore because none of the assets work. Unreal is someplace I might go and refresh myself because Unreal has come a long ways and it has a lot of power behind it. And Unity is really, really pissing me off. But there are other options. I could go with Godot, for example. Godot is an open source engine, meaning that it's going to be just as annoying as Unity, but at least I won't be paying them anymore. But I think Unreal would be a good choice, at least to explore. There's no reason to do that on stream, unless there are a bunch of Unreal users watching me and helping me through the bumps. It's been like a year and a half since I last used Unreal, and I never did anything more than experiment in it. Unreal can do... you know what? I better check. Unreal compile targets. No, that's not the same thing at all. Platforms. Cross-compiling for Linux, packaging products, compiling for Linux, building on iOS. So it sounds like it's got Windows, iOS, and Linux. But I don't believe... I'd be able to put it on a phone. Unreal Mobile. That's not the same thing at all. Those are cell phone plans. Unreal Engine for mobile. Mobile game development for Unreal Engine 4. iOS Quick Start, Android, and iOS game developments. Okay, so there is some mobile possibility here. Yeah, I think I'll try Unreal for a little while. I definitely need a break from Unity. It has just totally burned me out. But I'll still need to know how to do this stuff in Blender. So now I'm back to being annoyed at my lack of ability to do hair. Now, in Unreal, I searched the Unreal Asset Store for things like skin shaders, and I couldn't find anything. Maybe it's because I wasn't searching for the right things. The Unreal Marketplace, rather. But if anyone out there has used Unreal and has any clues as to, is it easy to set up skin and hair shaders? Because I'd like to. But I'm going to go ahead and call this a stream. It's not even an hour long, but it's just such a pain in the ass. And we made some major progress in that we're going to throw this shit out and watch a new tutorial. So I hope you have a less aggravating month than I have had. And I will see you on Wednesday if you want. And if not, maybe next Saturday. Have a good one.